Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tax Talk, broadcast by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. My name is Jordan Bateman, and I'm the British Columbia Director of the CTF, and I'm joined, as always, by our Alberta Director, Paige McPherson. Paige, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, I've been on tour a little bit this week, giving some speeches in Stony Plain, Alberta, and Westlock, Alberta, and that was awesome, but I'm glad to be back home now for Tax Talk.
Seeing the province, it's always kind of a fun thing about our job. And today we're actually going to talk to a guy who didn't just see a province, he saw the whole country. Aaron Wudrick, our federal director. He took the debt clock out on tour this summer. We'll get all the details on that, some funny stories, I'm sure. And then the start of the fall session in the House of Commons. Already the honeymoon seems to be dissipating for the Trudeau government. So Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm good. The kids are back after summer break here in Ottawa, so of course the hijinks have started already.
Yes. I've also got a warning for the people listening from Victoria, BC. 2,000 municipal politicians are about to descend on their city for their annual bun toss. This is an aggressive panhandling warning. They're going to be begging for money all over the place, so be prepared, Victoria people. Anyways, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to three things: lower taxes, less waste, and more government accountability. So it drives all the communications, research, and advocacy work we do. Aaron takes care of our Ottawa bureau for us, watching what's going on federally. Paige is in Alberta. We've got directors on the prairies in Quebec and Ontario and in the Atlantic provinces as well. Lots of ways to connect with us. Tweet us at Jordan Bateman or at Paige McP, or tweet the most prolific tweeter in the CTF firmament, Mr. Wudrick. It's at A Wudrick. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. At A Wudrick. And be sure to visit our website at taxpayer.com to see what the heck we're working on. You can also email me, bc.director@taxpayer.com. And really, the hot spot for us right now is Facebook. We are just killing it on Facebook. Last week alone, we had almost 2.5 million people look at different posts that we put up on Facebook, facebook.com/taxpayer.com. Paige, let's start with you. What's new?
So I have an interesting piece of news that the Alberta government has done, and I think it's positive, but I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this, Aaron and Jordan. So the Alberta government, the NDP, while they've been really bad on the taxing and spending side, they've been not too bad when it comes to transparency. They've been, that was part of their big platform push, was implementing transparency and accountability reforms in government, and they've since done a few things. So the latest thing that they've done is open up agencies, boards, and commissions to the public. So one of the big criticisms of the progressive conservative government that was here for 44 years was that they were just too cozy, too much nepotism, too much handing special appointments to their friends, cronyism, giving contracts to their friends, that kind of thing. And people really had a problem with that. I think that was part of the reason that they got ousted so dramatically in our last election. And so the NDP has, in an attempt to sort of take the cronyism out of it, has said they're going to open up agencies, boards, and commissions to the public. So there's literally an online form now you can fill out as a member of the public that if you want to be on one of these agencies, boards, and commissions, these sort of arm's length organizations of government, then you can just go on and apply, really just, picking them from the public. Now, obviously, there's still room for the NDP government to put in, people that they think fits their ideological biases or whatever. Of course, they're still open to that. But in general, I think it seems like a more fair way of doing things, and it's sort of an interesting way of doing things. But like I said, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
It sounds like the Senate process, Woody.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first thing that leapt to mind for me. I mean, of course, the problem with the Senate being these are the people that pass laws. But look, I think it sounds like a pretty good thing. You want to make it as open as possible. Like you say, the proof's going to be in the pudding. They're still the ones that are making the decisions in the end. So if it turns out everyone in the public is applying, but lo and behold, it all happens to be people associated with the NDP, well, they're going to have some explaining to do. But, look, I'll take them at their word right now and give it a chance. And if it does end up meaning that there's a better cross-section of people on the boards and commissions, that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In BC, we've had a board resourcing office for a while where you can put your name and resume in. Truth be told, though, our friends at Integrity BC probably follow the board appointments a lot closer than I do. and they manage to always find some political donor or flunky who's managed to get appointed to these boards. So, it's all in the discipline of how they actually unroll it. Hey, the Senate though only had 200 applicants or something. I should have put my resume in. I had a 1 in 200 chance of being a senator.
Yeah, we were thinking about having Porky apply as well. We think he's got some pretty strong credentials in terms of standing up for the people. But I was surprised to see that few people who applied. Although someone had suggested that the rule should actually be that it should be people who are nominated. I actually think there's something to that. Look, I think we shouldn't have this body and them being appointed is a problem. But if we're going to do it, the old saying is the types of people you want there are exactly the types of people who would never apply. And so, by applying yourself, you're sort of suggesting you think you'd be so great at it that alone might be a yellow flag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised by the small number of applications, because if you're in any sort of political circles, it's always the running joke, but not really a joke, that everybody's kind of hoping for a Senate appointment at the end of the road. No matter what your path is, that's like the ultimate, crowning glory at the end, and then you can just ride out the rest of your career sitting back in the Senate. So I was surprised too to see so few applicants.
Although, maybe there's an element of just pride here, right? Like everybody might want an appointment, but no one wants to actually admit that they're asking for it, right? And so by forcing people to actually ask, people would say, I take it if you ask me, but I'm not going to put up my hand and say, yeah, I want to be appointed, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hey, Aaron, have the Liberals said anything about Alberta's elected senators? I mean, Alberta has a list of people who've been approved by voters. Are they going to stick with that, or has that come up?
No, well, look, because of the Supreme Court reference before, because the Harper government, of course, appointed, I believe, a couple who had been elected, and, they've come and gone, and the Supreme Court basically came, in their ruling a couple years ago, said that you can't have this mixed body. It would change the nature of the Senate if some of them are elected and some of them aren't. And there is a case to be made that so long as the Senate remains unreformed, does it make any difference if they're elected in some parts but not others? Because then you get into these issues of, do they have more legitimacy? Should they be exercising more power? It's a complicated thing. And, I think most Canadians are at their wits' end with this institution that we seem to kind of be stuck with, even though everybody agrees that something there has got to change.
Yeah. Hey, who's the person that Trudeau could appoint to the Senate that would debunk the partisan myth? Ezra Levant? If he appointed Ezra to the Senate, would that kill?
Wow, I'd love to see the look on Ezra Levant's face if he was offered an appointment to the Senate. That would really be something. I'd love to see how that press conference would go.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of someone who would be like more unlikely than Ezra Levant to get a phone call from Prime Minister Trudeau asking if he wanted to be in the Senate.
He's probably at the top of the list.
That's probably the top. Yeah, probably number one.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Let's start a petition. Ezra for Senate. Let's do it. Right.
Just for the laughs.
Yeah, exactly. I can see the Rebel Media corollaries already. This will be great.
Oh, yeah.
Anything new with you, Aaron? What's going on out there?
Oh, nothing. Same old. No, of course. It's been a busy week up here, Jordan. But I don't know if you want to talk about the debt clock tour first before it all goes down the memory hole for me. I mean,
let's talk debt clock tour. Yeah. So, how many provinces? How many kilometers? How many days? You poor sucker. How long were you on the road?
It was about 6 weeks. So, we launched Victoria June the 6th. That was a Monday. We wrapped it up on July 18th here in Ottawa. So I went straight across the country and then sort of swung back through Southern Ontario and ended up in Ottawa. But, quite the experience. If anyone has ever had the privilege of driving across this country, it's a beautiful country, but it is big. And you can have days where you're driving 10 hours and you barely cross, a quarter of a province. So it is quite the endeavor. It was a pleasure and an honor to do it, I must say, to meet so many good supporters that the Taxpayers Federation has. Honest, down-to-earth people, really appreciate the message that we're spreading. And it is an important message, right? A lot of folks have said to me, isn't it kind of a silly gimmick that you have this giant clock with a number on it? And it is a silly gimmick, but you know what? It really does what it's supposed to do, which is make something visible, which is normally invisible. I mean, debt is a very serious issue. It costs all of us. It costs our children and our grandchildren. And people don't think about it. Politicians don't want to talk about it. But having this truck with these numbers, I can tell you the number one reaction from people is, I can't even pronounce that number. I don't even know how to say that number. It's so big. I can't believe it's going up so quickly. And, we got a really good response. Everywhere we went, big cities, small towns, people came out. The media certainly came out to pay attention to it. And that's our objective. We want this to be part of the conversation. It's not the only issue out there, but it is a big issue that needs to be part of every debate we have when it comes to spending tax dollars. So, didn't have any terrible logistical headaches. I'm surprised to say we had no breakdowns. We did almost
just your emotional ones, just your emotional.
Yeah.
And Aaron Gunn's breakdown over that spider somewhere in British Columbia.
Yeah, our colleague Aaron Gunn almost drove us off the road outside Kelowna because there was a little spider on the dashboard that I had to deal with. But other than that, it was pretty smooth sailing. Even got good weather, which I was shocked by. It's not an easy thing to go 6 weeks in. I think we got rain. Paige, what did we get rain one day when we were in Grand Prairie? And then I think I got rain on my last day on East Coast in Halifax too, but that's about it. So pretty good weather-wise too.
That's impressive.
And you had like show and shines. You really kind of embraced small town culture as you went across.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were in a parade in Northern Alberta. Paige, what was it? It was La Glace, right?
The show and go parade. I think that was in La Glace. Yeah. I mean, we did the small town circuit through Alberta for sure. Yeah,
it was a bit of a rainy day, so unfortunately wasn't as big a turnout as we might have hoped. But I remember we did get some candy, right, Paige? So the Taxpayers truck throwing candy at the children, like a Santa Claus parade. We also, we did a couple other things like I think we did a farmers market in Northern Ontario, and actually I think our biggest turnout on the whole tour was in Fredericton, New Brunswick, of all places. We must have had dozens of people at that one, and it was outside a soup kitchen. But there were a lot of folks out there who were at their wits' end, both with the federal and provincial governments in terms of spending. So it was good to see, in a part of the country that we're not known as traditionally having a whole lot of supporters in. We had quite a few people come out in the Atlantic province as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. We did the Big Bam June Jam. Where was that? It was Taylor, BC, I want to say.
Yeah, it was like a ski hill just south of Fort St. John, BC. Yeah, that was another interesting, not the sort of average thing that I think you expect to do when you sign up for this job, Paige?
Big Bam June Jam. Yeah, we did some cool community events. That's awesome. And really interesting that you had a really good turnout in Fredericton. Is there anywhere else in particular, any other communities that stand out to you as having a good showing of people?
Yeah, lots of places in New Brunswick generally were good. Saskatchewan was good as well. It was depended a lot on the time and day. I mean, doing something on a Sunday morning, it's harder to get people when they're busy. But if the weather was good, we saw people come out. It was just nice to see the excitement of some of these folks. In some cases, I remember we stopped in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. Just on the side of the road, we had, I think, 2 radio stations and 2 newspapers come. And some supporters, including a couple who'd driven they told me they'd driven almost 2 hours just to come and get a picture with the deck clock. And I thought that's commitment. And they were just really excited that we were doing it.
That's awesome.
Now you see, you got me thinking maybe it's time for another BC deck clock tour. It's like childbirth. You forget all the bad stuff, right? Or so I'm told. But and then you just remember the good things, right? My all-time favorite deck clock story of my own is downtown Kelowna, BC. Outside of AM 1150, Phil Johnson, the radio.
Oh yeah, we saw it there. Yeah,
hates that. Great guy. I'm standing out there, and these 7 old guys rumble up to me, and they're like, "We're the Romeos. We came to see the clock." And I'm like, "Romeos? Yeah, retired old men eating out. Our wives let us eat out once a week for breakfast." So the Romeos got their picture in the Taxpayer magazine because I like them so much. So they didn't buy me breakfast though. They wouldn't let. They went.
No, it's not part of it. That's so funny. Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing. I mean, when the debt clock was going through, because last time we did a debt clock tour here in Alberta was 2014, so not too long ago. But since then, our debt situation has changed so dramatically, and now we're racking up debt at such a rapid pace. So it's definitely, I would say, time at some point in the near future to bust out the debt clock in Alberta too.
Yeah.
Well, it's hanging out in Ontario for now, so whenever you guys want to send it back, we'll send back out that way.
Then I remember having it on the streets of Karamias, BC, and 40 degrees Celsius heat, and thinking to myself, what life choices did I make to lead me to this sweaty moment? It's like 3 o'clock, and the main street's deserted because it's just too hot to be outside, and I'm there sweating the debt. Yeah, that's good stuff. Okay, well, my what's new is City of Vancouver. my good friends at City of Vancouver, we landed a real body blow on them this week. It turns out Vancouver, midsummer, when no one was looking, passed a policy that will ban natural gas use within city limits by the year 2050. This is bad news for the 108,000 FortisBC natural gas customers in the city of Vancouver. It's bad news for the school district because, of course, they heat more than 100 schools with natural gas. It's bad news for our hospitals because they use natural gas to heat and sterilize equipment. Bad news for even TransLink, who, no fans of mine, but sympathize with the fact that they're buying pretty reasonably priced natural gas buses, and they wouldn't be able to use them in the city of Vancouver. The city of Vancouver fought back, claiming to us it's not a ban. We're just not going to have any natural gas being used by 2050.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's
that works.
One of these crazy stories where, Vancouver wants to be the greenest city in the world. They want to be zero greenhouse gas emissions. I pointed out that they only produce 1/3 of 1% of Canada's emissions every year. And, that's 1.6% of the world emissions. So hardly a stunning victory for the environment. But this has gotten a lot of media, a lot of press. As people start to come to terms with the thought, like, okay, we're damning people to higher utility costs forever. And in a city like Vancouver, affordability is the number one thing. If you switch from natural gas heating your home and water to electricity or to district energy like they want, you're talking about bills of about $1,400 more a year, just in energy costs plus all your upfront costs. So that's not going over great. And the city of Vancouver started explaining yesterday, but when you're explaining, you're losing, as Stephen Carter taught me on the Strategist podcast. That's been an enjoyable. It's been an enjoyable couple of days watching them get hoisted on their own petard, so to speak.
So what's the other thing that they're going to use? I mean, what's the next natural energy source that they're encouraging people to use for renewables?
Well, electricity, apparently, and renewables. So it's this kind of nebulous thing. 56% of residential energy comes from natural gas in the city of Vancouver now. In order to, if you switched all of British Columbia to from natural gas to electricity, which of course Vancouver's not all of it, but we had a scientist calculate that you would need 12 Site C dams, which is this incredibly controversial, massive $10 billion project being built in the Peace District of British Columbia. So that wouldn't be a problem, right? 12 more dams. I don't know if you can find 12 more spots to put giant hydroelectric dams in BC, let alone the social license you'd have to get to do it. So, yeah, it's one of those things that they put on paper. There's this great graph, and it has like current energy use, 56% natural gas, and then it goes to 0 in 2050. But they're not banning it. They just, you're not going to be able to use it.
And have they talked about how they're going to enforce this?
No.
What happens if
they've started with the building code. So they started by amending the building code. So within 10 years, 90% of the new buildings that would have used natural gas will use other energy forms. That's their...
Oh, Vancouver and their building codes.
Yeah.
I remember when I lived there, they banned doorknobs. You could not build a house with doorknobs.
Yeah, we don't have any doorknobs now except on city council. No, that's not nice. That's uncalled for, Jordan. That was terrible. Shame.
You're lowering the level of debate.
I withdraw the mark, Mr. Speaker. No, it's silly. There's 107 taxes, fees, and levies or significant regulatory costs imposed by the city of Vancouver on new housing. This is the 108th. Talking to some developers, they're talking about, on a big condo project, $2,000-$3,000 per door just in the infrastructure costs, let alone you're actually damning these poor people to higher utility costs from here on out. So it's one of those policies that no one thought much of until we put a price tag to, and now everyone's up in arms about it.
So I have to say, I remember when I was reporting in BC, the big thing was all about natural gas. The provincial government was obsessed with liquefied natural gas. It was all they ever talked about. And I know that was mostly, extracting LNG so that they could export it to new markets. But I mean, presumably with the provincial agenda to be so pro liquefied natural gas and then have the city say you actually can't use it?
Yeah, I mean, we have decades of government pushing us to use natural gas because it's so much cleaner than coal and other things. And now, this sudden shocking reversal. So, the BC government won't be happy with this. I had a great interview with a newspaper from the gas patch in Northeast BC. And they were saying that the general sentiment up there now is let the southern bastards freeze in the dark, which was pretty funny. But
borrow a quote from Ralph Klein.
Yeah. The funny thing about this, right, is one of the big pushes behind LNG to Asia is that it gets China off coal-fired power plants. It's so much cleaner for the environment. And, now we're trying to get ourselves off natural gas in the city of Vancouver. It's a silly, silly policy, and one that we're hoping, causes people to rethink the kind of city councils that they're electing.
Crazy. Vancouver's always good for these banning stories. Vancouver, always good for
Vancouver, yes. Well, yeah, and again, their city manager claims it's not a ban. Bateman's wrong, blah blah blah. But their own documents show it, and the media has been really good holding them to account, saying, Bateman didn't write this document, so what are you talking about here? But kind of a class. They don't like the word ban. The thing I discovered in this is that the word ban is a powerful tool, and we need to call a spade, and if they're banning something, we need to call it a ban, because there's a freedom aspect to this too, right? Like, who are they to tell me that what kind of that I need to switch out a natural gas water heater, or I can't cook with natural gas? Restaurants hate this thing too because they need natural gas to for walks and things like that. It'll be fun to watch this continue to unfold.
Yeah, especially because it's already so expensive to live in Vancouver. So to increase costs for homeowners further is crazy.
Yeah. The other thing is they claim they've been consulting and working with the natural gas company. This is the same natural gas company that sent them a letter saying you never consulted us or worked with us on this. So, details, right? Details. So there you go. But enough about wacky BC. Aaron, federal legislative session starting. We have Telford and Butts expensing big money. We have a cabinet minister who was born in Afghanistan or Iran or somewhere. And we have a legislative session coming up. Just, business as usual in Ottawa.
Yeah, I have to say the Conservatives seem to have taken opposition with gusto. They've dug up a bunch of interesting facts with their written questions in Parliament. We can talk about the big ones in a second, but there are a few sort of smaller ones that have been pushed off the pages, which are equally interesting. One of them was there was a question about the cost to produce the Prime Minister's YouTube videos. And the answer came back that it actually takes an average of 7 civil servants to produce one of the Prime Minister's YouTube videos. And I thought that was a very high number. Look at us. I mean, we're making this podcast, with our own technology by ourselves. 7 civil servants for our YouTube videos seems like a lot. Another one that I thought was very interesting was there used to be a department under Harper called the Office of Religious Freedoms that they set up. They got a couple $1 million. They were designed to sort of, I think their mandate was to, globally make sure that communities that were religious minorities that were oppressed were being taken care of. The new government came in, said, no, we're gonna get rid of this department. We're gonna have a new department, and it's called the Department of something like Human Rights and Inclusion, slightly different name. But the fun thing is the budget for this new department is 4 times the size of the old Office of Religious Freedoms, but they're still searching for, quote, programming opportunities on which to spend the money. So I thought, if this is probably not the essential statement of governance this government wants to make, is we're going to commit to spending this amount of money, and then we're going to try and figure out what we want to spend it on. I thought that is probably not the message that they want to send as a new government. Yeah. But of course, the big ticket item this week is the news that the Prime Minister's top 2 staffers, Jerry Butts, his principal advisor, and Katie Telford, his chief of staff, collected a huge reimbursement in terms of moving expenses to move from what turns out to be Toronto to Ottawa. Mr. Butts expensed $127,000 and Ms. Telford expensed about $80,000. A lot of people said, well, how can you even rack up that kind of expense by moving from Toronto to Ottawa? A lot of it has to do with real estate fees. They sold their houses in Toronto, and taxpayers are picking up the tab on a lot of those real estate fees. Now, to give them credit, they did come out last night and said, we recognize some of this is not right. They're paying back a pretty good chunk of it, about $60,000. Not as much as we would like to see. I think they also should be repaying back the real estate fees as well. But we did ask for an explanation and apology. They did sort of give it to us, so I want to be fair about that. But more importantly, they've committed to actually changing the rules. They've given Treasury Board Scott Brisen a mandate to revise the expense rules. That, to us, is the real important thing here. We've got to make sure these rules are tighter, because a lot of Canadians are asking themselves, why are we paying this kind of coin for these people to move? There are some things digging around the expense directive that are so outrageous. They don't apply in this case, but people are eligible for them, because these rules actually apply to civil servants as well, not just political staff. You can expense moving your boat to Ottawa if you happen to have a boat. If you have antiques shipping can be expensed. Boarding of your pets, that can also be expensed. So, these are things that taxpayers should not be on the hook for. So we're certainly going to be providing some input to the government on the way they should tighten up these rules so this never happens again.
Mm-hmm. They'll move your champagne collection by trolley, your yacht. Yeah.
Oh, my word.
I mean, who thinks these things up? Only a bureaucrat could come up with a rule saying, well, what if we want to get this high caliber staffer, but they have an antique collection they can't leave behind? I mean, who is thinking these things up? It's pretty outrageous.
So funny. I mean, they both profited, right? They both made big bucks on their $1 million homes. Is that correct?
Yeah, and this is why I think this needs to be part of the debate. Like, the counter argument that people have been making is, well, what if we have good people in certain places and we can't get them unless they have to take a hit on their house? And I'm saying, look, if you want to put some sort of special provision in there where there's an extenuating circumstance, we can have that debate later. But that's clearly not what happened here, right? This was not an issue of people taking a loss. It's not as if they bought in somewhere where the market was high and it bottomed out, and that was the one thing. I mean, the argument to me that the only thing that was, that allowed these people to move here, remember, these are people who are close associates of Mr. Trudeau. They ran his campaign. They frankly are taking one of the best jobs in the country in terms of, honor and privilege of serving and getting to help a new government implement their agenda. The idea that they need to be compensated in this way in order to allow them to come, I think, doesn't really sell with most Canadians.
No, definitely not. Of course, I agree. It's a given that they would have come and joined Team Trudeau, and they were, they've been on that team for a while, and as they should. So they paid some of it back. And so what's the reaction bit? When I saw that, I was kind of like, okay, it's good that they're making some steps, but it seems like a half measure, and it was kind of funny at the same time. Oh, here you go, I'm going to pay a little bit of this back, and it was a bit of a half-hearted apology. And what is it? Are people satisfied that you're talking to with paying this back? What are people saying?
Well, I give them sort of, if this is a 5-star rating, I give them a 2.5, right? Look, they are owning up. That's better than putting your head in the sand and stonewalling. They stonewalled for 2 days. That was bad. They owned up, so that's good. That's better than, I was gearing up to be hitting away on this for weeks and weeks, but they spared me that hassle. I put the expenses sort of into 3 categories. There's stuff that's okay. There's stuff that's definitely not okay, and there's stuff in the middle. They've owned up to the stuff that's definitely not okay, and they're keeping the stuff that's okay. Like, I don't think anyone has a problem with shipping your stuff down there, your furniture, and like if you have to transport your family down, that's fine. That's fine. But the stuff in the middle is the stuff where we disagree. They're not paying back the real estate fees. That's like $40,000. I think that's something that should be paid back. But more than, I'll let the Conservatives attack them for partisan reasons. That's not our job. What I want to focus on is holding them to their word when they say, we're going to change this rule. And we intend to be very vocal about saying, make sure these rules are tight, because these need to be not eligible for reimbursement, or if they are, there's got to be a serious cap on them, because hypothetically, what if you had some Canadian with a $20 million home, some really wealthy person? Are we really saying we Canadians should be on the hook for the 5% fee, in selling that home? I really don't think that is acceptable at all.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Or for the taxes on selling a home.
The taxes, the land transfer taxes.
Yeah. No, look, I think part of this is Butts is such a smarmy figure on Twitter. Folks, if you ever want to be enraged at at the way government thinks of you, follow Jerry Butts on Twitter. and there's this kind of, the Conservatives, I think, still sting over $16 orange juice. I think they still, there's that kind of vengeance aspect to it. So I wonder how much of that is this. But there's like 6 or 7 other staffers sprinkled throughout government who have 6-figure moving fees too. So I assume some of them will be announcing shortly that they'll be repaying as well.
Yeah, I was asked about that. I mean, Butts and Telford said that they were paying it back, and they weren't going to ask other staffers to. I think it's an open question if these people can sleep at night knowing that their bosses, their bosses put their money where their mouth was. It's a hard thing to do when you're a senior person in a government that claims to be watching every dime carefully and understanding what the middle class is going through, to turn around and take that money. It is totally incongruent with saying, oh, we understand what you're going through and what you feel, when you're turning around and taking these huge sums out of taxpayers' pocket.
Yeah.
The taxes are really what got me. I can't believe that we would be on the hook for their land transfer taxes when they are raising taxes on Canadians and then expecting Canadians to pay their taxes for them. Not that specific tax, of course, but God, I mean, I found that was really a kick in the pants. And you're so right about the real estate fees. Just because somebody has an expensive home, we should be paying more for them because they're, living a more lavish lifestyle than other staffers. It's quite frustrating. I wonder if the same level of scrutiny will continue to be applied in the same way that, with Bev Oda and others who've had expense scandals. Is the spotlight going to be on them until they review this policy? I certainly hope so. Because the response so far seems to have been, they're paying some of it back, which is positive, but even in their apology, repeating again, we were within the rules, and our prime minister coming out and saying, well, we were within the rules, which you pointed out on Twitter, Aaron, is the Mike Duffy defense. It's basically, we're entitled to our entitlements. And it's just so unsatisfactory an answer. It's great to see them paying some of this back, but just to continue pushing that, but just so we were entitled to these entitlements. We're going to pay them back because they're kind of unreasonable, but we were entitled to these entitlements. I just don't know what taxpayer is satisfied with that answer.
Well, and isn't the rule, Aaron, that the minister responsible signs off? So the rule is whatever the prime minister wants, in this case for Telford and Butts, right?
Exactly. It's at the discretion of the minister, in this case, the prime minister. So no matter how you slice it, whether it's within the rules or not, in this case, you have a case where the prime minister essentially signed off on very generous expenses. You can't fall back on a rule for that. As you said, Paige, it's the Duffy defense. And if it's only about following the rules, Mike Duffy followed the rules, Bev Oda followed the rules, Jane Philpott followed the rules, that wasn't good enough in any of those cases. And again, to give Jerry Butts some credit, he did say that that's not always good enough to say you're following the rules. But he's also the one who's, in the past said that, as liberals, entitlements are our kryptonite. Well, I can tell you, $200,000 expenses is a lot of kryptonite. So it is a bit ironic that a guy who seems self-aware enough to know this is a vulnerability even fell into this trap in the first place.
Canada's back. Back to spending. All right. So, that was a big thing this week. Trudeau was in New York at the United Nations. Speaking of Mr. Butts, I thoroughly enjoyed people who dug up his tweet ridiculing Stephen Harper for speaking at a UN General Assembly to an empty room, and then people posting a picture of Trudeau speaking to virtually the same empty room. I
think people might phone into those meetings. I think there are ways you can attend those addresses without actually being there in person. But of course, when you're a partisan staffer and you got to get that zing in there, you got to be careful because it might come back to bite you later.
Yeah, I'm guessing he would probably want that one back if he could take it back.
Yeah. What's on the agenda for the fall, you think? Where are they at in some of these huge things? Like marijuana legalization seems to have stalled out. Where are they at with some of these larger files?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not clear. They're certainly facing some tension now with their commitments to the Aboriginal community. They have talked about putting a lot of money out the door. News out today that First Nations Chief Harry Bellegarde's not happy that the money's not flowing fast enough. And as most people know, you never run into more trouble than when you try and shovel the money out the door too fast. So it's good to see how they navigate that. Same on pipelines. On the one hand, this government is tepidly trying to get some deals done on making sure there's pipelines built, but the flip side is they've got a lot of opposition in part of their coalition. They have environmentalist groups, First Nation groups that are opposed pipelines. So it's going to be interesting to see how they manage to walk that line. They can't please everybody, so they're going to have to decide pretty quickly who they disappoint.
But social license. So I don't understand. But we're getting carbon taxes. Isn't that automatically social license for pipelines? No? Doesn't seem to be
carbon taxes too, because that is going to be another hot one, right? I mean, this is a government that came to power saying we're going to do federal provincial negotiations differently. You know, we're not going to impose things like Harper, who would just meet with them individually. We're going to meet, we're going to hash things out. Well, lo and behold, now they're saying, you know, we're basically going to negotiate with you on carbon taxes. But if you don't do anything, we're just going to shove something down your throat. I think that is really flies in the face of their commitment. And Canadians better hang onto their wallets, because, you know, this is not a situation, you know, even in those best cases, which I know it's not great in BC, Jordan, but that would be better than some of the other scenarios being envisioned in other provinces. But it is, you know, Canadians got to watch out, because this is going to wallop them.
Can I ask about that? Because I am fascinated. When I was in Stony Plain the other night, I was asked about, you know, if a provincial government was to say no to the carbon tax. They gave the example, if Brad Wall pushes back, maybe, you know, the premier of Yukon is very opposed to carbon taxes. If he continues to push back, the federal government, how can they possibly impose a tax on just one province? I know they've said sort of vaguely that they're thinking that they might do it through gas taxes or something, but how could they? I'm fascinated. I want a premier to push back on this so I can see how exactly would the federal government impose a tax on just one or just two provinces and call it fair.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, they could certainly set up legislation that has caveats that, you know, this does not apply in situations where, or just like carve it out word for word and amend the legislation accordingly. But I think the optics of it are very bad for a government that claims to be, you know, all about respecting jurisdiction. You know, say what you will about the Harper government, but one thing that they were good at was not stepping on provincial toes, right? Mm-hmm. They let provinces sort of do their own thing. Nowhere is this more clear than in Quebec, where, like, you know, separatist sentiment was like at an all-time low, because they basically left them alone. And so for this government, you know, out of its own ambition to essentially pursue its environmental agenda, to overstep provincial jurisdiction, I think is going to bring them for a world of pain.
And there's no sort of constitutional elements that say you can't impose a tax on just one province here. Like, I mean, it seems like something you should not be able to do.
Well, there are ways that historically people will know that the federal government can't indirectly, and so that's what we might see here, right? Like they wouldn't on paper be exercising a provincial power, but they just find some indirect way to do it or to punish a province in a way that would have the same impact.
Oh, it's just, oh God, it's it's so bothersome. It's really bothersome that a federal government would do that and step on, as you say, provincial toes in that way.
Paige, if I want to fight carbon taxes, where should I go? Like, what, you got a website or something where I can?
Yeah. Definitely go to scrapthecarbontax.ca. That's if you're worried about the Alberta carbon tax, but of course on taxpayer.com in general, we have so much information about the carbon tax. We've got pages on how you can sign petitions against carbon tax. In every province, we've got ways you can contact your MLAs or your MPPs, your provincial representatives in provinces. So if you're pissed about the carbon tax, we have ways that you can let the government know that you're dissatisfied. But I have to ask Aaron, so do you know anything about the pot legalization issue? Like, I mean, where are we looking at for that on the provincial or the federal agenda?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, it is something that is, the government hasn't changed its tune on the issue. I think perhaps it's not as high a priority because it's not going to be quite as speedy a process as they'd envisioned. So I don't think that is a high priority for them at this point. I'd say the other thing that's going to be very interesting is the electoral reform issue, which, they have struck a committee which met over the summer. To their credit, a lot of politicians were on vacation. This committee had to swelter it out here in Ottawa through the summer. They are supposed to report by December the 1st, and the jury's still out on whether or not they're going to have a referendum on electoral reform. This is something that, of course, we at CTF are very keen on. We could be for reform if that's what Canadians want, but the only way to find that out is if we ask them. So, we think the government is still sort of feeling its way out about whether or not they need to have one. My sense is they are either going to give in and have a referendum, or find some other way to just run out of time, because I think the chances of the government wasting so much political capital, because they waste a lot trying to change the electoral system when they have so many other things they want to do, it's just not on. And frankly, I've heard that, even within the Liberal caucus, there are MPs sort of saying, this is not a big concern to my constituents. They're more concerned about all these other issues. Why are we wasting all our time and energy on tinkering with the electoral system? We could be doing all these other things instead.
Mm.
Yeah, running out of time is a perfectly valid excuse of this. I mean, you don't want to rush democratic reform anyways. I mean, we at the CTF have always supported, different kind of forms than first past the post, but they have to be approved by, you got to approve it by voters.
Well, this is it. Process is important, right? Unlike some of the other folks who agree with us on reform, we're basically saying you can't cheat. You can't just take a shortcut to get what you want. You have to respect what the people want. And the only way to find out what they want is to ask them. So, it would be great if, we can all snap our fingers and get the policies we want, but that's not the way democracy works. You have to ask the people for permission to do it. And I don't like the fact that there are certain reformers who think we should just be able to take a shortcut and put in place things without asking Canadians first.
Mm-hmm. It seems that there's really no more fundamental an issue that you would need a referendum on than electoral reform. It's just so foundational to our democracy and how we make every decision in this country, for governing the people. It's, I can't think of another issue that would require a referendum more.
No, and the people who say, do we have to have a referendum on everything? I say, well, you certainly do on the mechanism that you use to hold the government to account, right? Any other policy that the government implements, we can approve or disapprove of it by voting in the next election. But if you change the way that the vote counts, that is tinkering with that mechanism. That is a big problem. And I think that is the reason that, as Jordan said, you don't want to rush this. We want to get it right. That's the most important thing. And if it means, it has to wait until after the next election, so be it. It's more important to get it right than to meet some artificially imposed deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Hey, we're running late here. So Paige, waste of the week?
So the waste of the week here in Alberta is that our premier and a few political staffers are going to New York City to promote the carbon tax. And this is the second trip of this kind, specifically to New York. We've also had government officials go to Mexico to promote the carbon tax and explain it. At the federal level, Aaron, we sent over 300 people to Paris for a conference on climate change. It's wasteful here. This trip in particular is costing about $40,000. That's the government's estimate. And that's a lot of money when you are as in debt as this government is, when you're running a $14.5 billion deficit, when you account for infrastructure spending. It's concerning. But most of all, I just think that, it's quite rich that governments preach that, all this talk about how we need to reduce our emissions and how we all must pay out largely in this carbon tax. And then they, flit off to different countries on taking, I don't think they're cycling there. I don't think they're walking there. I think they're probably taking large planes, especially in the federal case when you're sending 300 people. It would be great if, since the government is so keen at all these different levels of imposing a carbon tax onto residents, that maybe they could lead by example a little bit. When's the last time we praised a politician for Skyping into a conference because they wanted to reduce their emissions? When's the last time a government touted that as something that's positive that they're doing for the environment? That's an actual tangible step that they're taking to physically reduce their emissions. It would be nice if the government, instead of preaching from, their lofty perch about climate change, they were to lead by example instead of taking these, glorified expensive photo ops on taxpayer dime while they chug out these emissions in the process.
It's like
totally.
A Mercer-like rant there by Paige. This was great.
Yeah, I'm fired up about this. It's annoying, they're barreling forward with this carbon tax, and there's so much hypocrisy at all levels.
New York. If you're a tourist there in New York and you see any Alberta officials riding the Ferris wheel in Times Square or up the World Tower, the Freedom Tower, or visiting 30 Rock, please tweet those pictures to...
Take a selfie.
at Paige McP. Those are your tax dollars at work. We'd love to know.
We'd love to know.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode of Tax Talk from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Be sure to follow Paige on Twitter at Paige McP. Follow the amazing, prolific tweeter, Aaron Wudrick at A Wudrick. Or follow me at Jordan Bateman. You'll get lots of Packers talk on Sunday. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please subscribe, give us a good rating, and check out our website at taxpayer.com. We'll be back next week with another Tax Talk. Thanks, everyone.